The people say, I think you're tripping too much when I just made a video talking about some of the benefits of psilocybin. So I want it to be known that I haven't done psilocybin in, half a year. And because last time it scared the hell out of me. It beat me down to the ground, told me that I was an egotistical fraud, and just basically told me to take a break.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Your Mate Tom podcast. In this episode, I have a chat with the Quentin Experiment, who has become quite popular in the psychonaut community. And I can see why. He's a very cool dude, very humble, he's got a good heart, and is also very articulate when it comes to explaining the psychedelic experience. And we went deep on this podcast, as you could imagine. So you can check out the timestamps in the description box below. Go support Quentin. I'll leave links. And yeah, you can check out more info in the description box. But yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, then feel free to check us out on Spotify and iTunes as well. Give us a 5-star rating if you're feeling generous enough. It really helps us out. And of course, if you've received any value from this content, check out patreon.com/yourmatetom and consider becoming a monthly supporter. We are completely fan funded by you guys, and what can I say except for thank you so much for helping us do what we do. We really appreciate it. And especially our top patrons, which you can see on the screen now. You guys are legendary status. And also feel free to check out our website, yourmatetom.com, and sign up to our email list. Recently, well, not even recently, since I swear, since I've started this channel, I've had conflict with YouTube and a bit of issues here and there. Like just the other day, I had a video removed. So yeah, go on my website. This will just be the best way to keep in direct contact, and you can be in the loop with future retreats that come up and things like that. And yeah, we got some good stuff. I'm not going to spam you. It's all good. All you have to do is give us your email address. Email address, of course, email address. Enjoy the podcast. Leave a comment below and share it with your friends. And I'll catch you on the next video. Peace. I also want to give a shout out to my good friend Jason Stevenson, who does awesome free guided meditations. Go check out the description box below, click the link, and I'll see you on the other side.
Doing good. I'm in a pretty beautiful area, so I'm not really too cooped up,
Yeah, where do you live?
I've got all kinds of hikes. I live in super northern Washington, so tons of waterfalls and hikes and just ridiculously cool stuff.
That's amazing.
I won't be drinking on the podcast, don't worry.
That's sick, man.
Yeah, so
how's the lockdown and stuff where you're at? Do they find you outside or?
No, it's more a lot of advisories, but nobody's really forcing anybody to do much of anything. You kind of just get socially shamed if you're out in public too much, which is a good thing, I think, for the most part.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah.
I think it's level 2. Actually, I'm pretty sure recently they did implemented a law where they can fine you $1,600 if you don't have a good excuse for being out.
Man, yeah. I understand that. It's just I wouldn't want to be the one to get hit with that 1,600,
But on that being said, I think exercise is a valid excuse. So I guess I don't know how they're going to enforce that, but
yeah, they can't keep us from the trails, man. I got to go on hikes and stuff still. I won't touch anybody or talk to them, but you got to let me go outside,
Good for the immune system.
Yeah, good for the soul.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people have the wrong idea in terms of trying to avoid this thing instead of trying to build their immune system. And going out in nature is perfect for that.
I've always been a super dirty kid too.
Yeah.
Eating dirt and just sand and the worst of the worst.
That's sick, man. So how you going with your channel and stuff?
It's going pretty good. It's
booming.
You probably
looks like it.
Are one of the most good people I can talk to about this, because it almost feels like it manifests itself a bit. You're doing the work, but the direction it goes kind of feels like it goes wherever it goes. I don't really I can't say I have some grand vision here, It kind of just happened.
When did you start the channel?
Last July. The end of last July.
Okay, so pretty relatively
It's about
recent.
9 months.
Yeah, yeah. Have you found yourself
Mhm.
like changing your opinions already from what you've talked about in the past, or and have you made
Yep,
any videos, for example,
definitely.
where you're like, oh, I don't know if I agree with that anymore, and you know what I mean?
It, yeah, it's more like minor nitpicks come up when I rewatch it, and I would love to just go back and like almost debunk myself, you know?
It's good.
Like there is that feeling of permanence of putting out your old thoughts when you almost want to give them the like the DLC update.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
Yeah,
an old, yeah, it's like Windows
you're
98, it's
like, I
outdated.
promise I don't still think that horribly.
Yeah. Yeah, tell me about it. Well, if you're already thinking like that 9 months, I think I've been doing this for like 5 years, so it's quite cringy
Yeah.
going back, and it's like, oh, you idiot. That's why now
So how
I always come with that mindset of like, just assume that everything I'm saying right now is wrong. So just
yeah.
give that disclaimer. Like I'm just still kind of figuring this out myself, so don't take myself too seriously. You know what I mean?
Yeah, one thing that's really freaky is how you kind of can already, without any, without deserving it whatsoever, you can almost have an air of authority. And I try to destroy that at every
Yeah, no.
instance. Like, I don't want this. I don't know really all that much, to be honest, you know?
Yeah, it actually makes me think of like Terrence McKenna and all these guys. I'm sure even he was probably like, dude, don't take my words too seriously. I don't know shit. I'm just kind of figuring this thing out. I'm a human too, you know?
Yeah, I'm really interested by McKenna because, you know, he was such a pioneer in that area. I wonder how he
Mm.
tackled his ego. You know what I mean? Like he was giving these lectures and these talks to these groups of people, and not a ton of other people that were on his frequency were doing that, you know? So
Yeah, man.
I wonder what his ego was like.
And I'm sure he didn't know, unless he had some crazy psychic abilities, that his lectures were going to reach millions and millions of people and get talked on the Joe Rogan podcast and, you know,
That's what
us
messes
right
me up,
now. You know
right?
what I mean?
Yeah. I know, like maybe you don't walk in a certain room because of this discussion and the entire timeline shifts.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on like how like his journey with psychedelics? As far as I know, he had a really difficult mushroom trip, and then since then he didn't have like a heavy trip anymore.
Yeah, I
Imagine
remember
how
hearing
hard that
about
would
that.
have been to scare Terrence McKenna off. You know what I mean?
I relate to that a lot because I often am asked like what my favorite psychedelic is and things like that.
Yeah,
I usually say psilocybin just because of some of the powerful experiences that I've had, but at the same time, it's also what I do the least for
yeah,
good reason. I feel I
me
can't.
too. And
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Well, because mushrooms has I don't know, like the way I experience mushrooms personally is that I'm stepping into their world, their realm. I'm not playing by my rules anymore. Whereas with at least LSD, I feel more
yeah,
control. Like I'm in kind of my own simulated reality. It's more cognitive. But with mushrooms, it's I don't know something. Not to sound too woo woo, but it's like I'm stepping into the gods of the mushrooms, and it's playing. I'm playing by their
exactly.
rules. You know what I mean? So I can't
What's more funny
return
is
there
the
too
people
often.
who have not had these experiences and think that we're personifying these things when, if anything, it's almost like an involuntary personification. Like you feel like you're being beat up by these elders for doing something wrong.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah,
I don't think there's anything wrong with, personifying things. Like you've been getting into Hermetic philosophy, as above, so below. There's always, as within, so without.
yeah,
The
yeah,
microcosm is a reflection of the
yeah.
macrocosm. So maybe all
I
these
mean, the
plants do
subjective
have their
field,
own mind in their own plane. They just work differently.
absolutely.
Yeah, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts on
man.
the Hermetic philosophy? Because I'm so glad I saw you like get into it because it's like my most read spiritual or quote unquote spiritual, but I also actually deem it scientific in a lot of ways. But
Yeah.
it's so profound,
It
man. Yeah,
was
what
really
are your thoughts on
it
it?
was
Like,
really
yeah,
freaky to get my hands on, and it makes it even more spooky that the origins are sort of debated and sort of controversial, and there's sort of a plain reading by somebody who might have a more skeptical mind, and then there's this deep reading that this is this series of teachings that has been passed down hand to mouth, as they say in the book, for quite some time,
mm.
and it's very, very chin scratching, to say the least.
And what are like some nuggets that stay with you?
I got to take a water. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right. Got to keep hydrated.
My bad.
I got my
Um,
got my tea.
Gotta keep that H2O going, you know?
Yeah, fuck
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, take that tea in, man.
mm.
I think I think some of the strange things about it are that some of it resonates with what we're still learning in modern science. So when they say things like, when they talk about the principle of vibration, that everything is never at rest and that it's always moving at some frequency, it is strange, because when we speak of particles, we do speak of them this way. We do speak about, especially if we're talking about, I would never step into quantum physics and pretend to understand it, but it absolutely is about this probability field of where these particles can be. And that, to me, is essentially talking about moving at what you may call a vibration. Try to think of some of the other principles.
Like polarity, that's an obvious
here.
one. Like everything comes in opposites. There's a negative and positive charge to everything. Yes. Well, I'm as far as I'm aware,
that definitely manifests in my own life.
Yeah, I think most principles have been proven by science, at least to some degree, except for, I think, the last one, principle of gender, which we're still kind of going through, which is interesting.
That one was a bit interesting. I didn't fully understand it, to be honest. Do you feel like you understood it?
Well, there's still a lot to understand, but I can give it a go. As far as I understand it, it's not about just penis and vaginas. Sex is the manifestation of gender, right? So the way they break it down is that masculinity is creation, femininity is generation. And if you want to think of it of a more like, I don't know, quantum physics level, and I'm not going to pretend I understand it either, but
I won't either.
The masculine principle is the positive end of the atom, whereas the femininity is the negative part. So it's more like, and you know how like as above, so below, so it applies to all planes of existence. So you've got like mental gender, you've got the masculine and feminine part of how you think. And you can think of it as left hemisphere or right hemisphere. But yeah, as
I'm thinking about this now, I think the principle of mentalism actually has stuck with me the most, because it kind of hit me right when I was in the middle of some like non-dual investigations, trying to kind of figure out what some of these teachers like Rupert Spira are talking about.
Right.
And just to see that echoed in a text that is, some people say, 150 years old, some people may say is cited from much older sources. It really, really freaked me out to think that the subjective field is sort of generating everything in a dream sort of way. But although that doesn't take away the importance of the dream necessarily.
No, well, it's like it says in the Kabbalion, even if this is all a dream, you still have to act as if it's real. Otherwise, you're going to fall and tumble over and fuck yourself up big time. And the pain will be very real. Yeah. You know what I mean? So on a practical sense, you have to treat it as if it's real. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, man. I've always found that tricky to reconcile some of the Eastern teachings about acceptance, and you might even call it like passiveness, right, with this Western go get 'em kind of mentality. Because part of me, when I fully settle and I guess you could say accept the now, part of me still wonders, and I'm sure it's the ego, like what's next? Like what am I gonna do?
Yeah, there's always a paradox with these kind of thing. I think be present, accept where you're at, but what happens if your life's in chaos? Do you just accept it? I don't know.
Exactly. Or you're the direct cause of your misery at the moment, and you need to take action.
Yeah, and sometimes your present moment is a reflection of the past. So sometimes being present, you're just kind of reinforcing your past traumas and mistakes.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying being present is bad or it's good, but like in its context, man. Context is everything. So
of course, like, do you get to decide to be present after being massively irresponsible and causing others grief?
Exactly. I feel you got to earn that shit. I feel to like really be present and accept. Yeah.
I think Eckhart might have a bone to pick with me for saying that, but it sometimes feels like you got to earn that presence. But that's definitely our egos, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know, man. But it's a profound book, man. It's definitely helped me, I don't know, just kind of understand reality in a much bigger sense, and it helps really reconcile those paradoxes, even the non-dual and the dual, like the polarity we're talking about, how it's like you are connected to everything, but at the same time you're a human being living in a relative plane, and you have to abide by certain laws. You know what I mean? You're not above everything. Maybe on the deepest absolute level you are, but
also this,
definitely,
man. And also this discussion of rhythm, this idea that when we look at the cosmos, there's this, it's really a beautiful dance. I mean, if you just
Mm.
observe most things at the microscopic or even, the macroscopic level, it seems like this beautiful chaotic dance. And I love that.
Yeah, the seasons, ebbs and flows, high tide, low tide.
Hmm.
And those
Yeah,
cycles
on psychedelic, that
manifest
hits you
on
hard too.
yeah, and those cycles manifest in like on the smallest levels from the atom to the cosmos itself.
Hmm.
It's fucking unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I feel like right now we're going
Yeah.
through a pretty hectic cycle.
Hmm.
I don't know what's
It's
going
like
on, but Jesus Christ, it's
the
crazy.
current world nowadays.
Yeah, man, it's insane. Just
Yeah.
like the time that we
Freaks
live
me
in
out.
right now. Yeah, me
Hmm.
too.
It's hard to know, how much is the bias of being in this time and place, and how much is actually falling apart around us. But I want to think it's it's the first one, and not everything's falling apart around us.
It's definitely the first one. We're special. No, I don't know.
Yeah,
It
we're
could
definitely
be, but it
special.
actually could be. I don't know. I've only
Yeah.
lived in this time, so I can, I'm biased in
Hmm.
that sense.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
But at the same time, even now, like with technology and how it's growing, like our generation, like with the internet, I don't know if you grew up like pre-internet. I think that's all I
Hmm.
remember, but
I
that changed everything, just how
I
we
got
behave and connect with each other.
oh, sorry, man. I was gonna
Hey,
say
right.
that my internet experience is basically I got the last run of the dial-up phone computers in about fifth or sixth grade.
Oh, did you? How old
So
are you?
I'm 22.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Early days of the weirdo internet, I still had some of that, but not the super early internet.
Yeah, I actually remember like the earliest form of porn, and there was no streaming, there's no videos. You have to wait for
Oh yeah, what?
you have to wait for like a JPEG photo to load. So it's like bar by bar, and then once it loads the nipple, then
Yeah.
you go.
I had that memory too. I had
Did
a
ya?
prepaid phone in fifth, and I remember waiting ages for this picture of this. I think it was an ass to load. Just an absurd long amount of time.
Yeah, now I'm like, I don't know. I'm actually doing NoFap, so that's been quite challenging. I don't know if you've had any
What's that
experience
like?
with it. I just quitting porn and minimal
Hmm.
masturbation, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't say I've personally done that before, but I hear about it and I'm curious about it because it has a pretty sizable community at this point.
Yeah, I think, listen, I don't want to go too extreme. I think every movement, there's always an extreme point that you can reach. But I think just with jacking off or, ejaculating, it's a lot of creative energy. That's like the way I think of it is like it's sexual energy and creative energy is exactly the same thing. So if you're using all your energy and just masturbating or whatever, then you're going to have a lot less energy just with life. You're going to have less willpower, less discipline, less energy to create things. You
Hmm.
know,
Well,
actually,
one,
I sorry to cut you off, but I just reminded
no
me
worries.
of Napoleon Hill. He wrote a very famous book called Think and Grow Rich, and there was a chapter in there called Sexual Transmutation, which borrows from the Kabbalion, right, Hermetic philosophy, and they talk about that a lot. Because you've read the book, so are you familiar with mental
Mhm.
transmutation? Well, yeah, so same
Yes,
sort of
I'm familiar
principle.
with the concept.
Yeah, so same sort of principle with sexual transmutation is that's they believe that that's the best way to really manifest shit and like create things is by
Hmm.
holding that energy.
Yeah.
And
And,
yeah,
strangely enough, it does kind of feel like at orgasm, I'm just going to be willing to be silly. Sometimes you do get these sacred intimations or these very powerful feelings that feel almost like as close to divine as you may feel on certain psychedelics or things like that. And I can imagine how there could be a theory behind withholding this.
mm,
And it's also clear to me, and
yeah,
probably to everybody else, that sexual pathology has only increased as our ability to see every single type of sexual behavior has increased. And so while I think, personally, I may not need that at the moment, I can imagine this is affecting millions of people.
mm,
Absolutely.
yeah, for sure. Well, even
You would agree
myself.
then?
Well, yeah, man. Like I got like really addicted to just porn when I was like,
Hmm.
fuck, 10 years old maybe. I don't even know. 11. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and especially you got to think about now. Like I grew up in the dial-up era, so it
Hmm.
was internet porn was just starting to become a thing. But I think now it's like you got virtual reality, you got like sex dolls. They're gonna probably
Hmm.
invent certain things where you can like plug into a virtual reality and then you can like feel a woman touching you. I don't know. They're probably going to invent some shit like that, and
My man, they have
it's
synchronized
scary.
toys with videos. This is the future.
Oh, and that's real. Like that's already a
Yeah, that's the
technology that's
dark
out.
arts right there for sure, certainly.
Fuck. Yeah, dude. I don't know. I don't know. Scary shit. But we got to
Yeah,
do what we got to do.
so do you feel like abstaining has just overall increased your well-being?
Yeah, to a certain degree, because I don't want to be too extreme. Because I do have a girlfriend. I gotta have sex, otherwise we won't be happy. If the wife
Sure.
ain't happy,
Hmm.
then no one's happy. But yeah, no, I still, so I still do it in that context. But in terms of like me looking at porn and just masturbating, I try to keep that. I'm trying to eliminate it completely, but it's a lot harder than it seems. No pun intended. Yeah.
You're familiar with Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, Stoic
Yeah.
philosophy, sort of.
Yeah, I like that. Actually,
Yeah.
I do a lot
Uh,
of like negative visualizations, just picture myself in like horrible situations and then see how I would react. I kind of like those games.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It kind of makes me laugh to think about, sort of a modern Marcus Aurelius tome that might exist, where it's actually just talking about the dangers of online pornography and other like modern dangers. Because when we read his context, he sometimes complained about very critical books and things like that, because in his day, woo-woo philosophers were just all the rage and polluting the minds of the youth. But now it's porn.
Mm,
And so we would probably have words like that in a modern text that related to Stoicism.
definitely. Even still, a lot of the woo-woo philosophies are still kind of, I fell into, like personally, I fell into a few traps just believing too much in the woo-woo philosophy, which kind of, I guess it severed my cord to this physical reality, and then I started to become too much in the clouds, you know what I mean? And it wasn't very practical.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of
When
people
was
fall
this
into
about?
these traps. I would say 3 years ago is when I kind of really became aware of these traps. And then that's when I became a lot more practical with my philosophies and a lot more vigilant, and especially careful of which teachers I'm listening to, especially spiritual
Yeah, that
gurus. You
shows
got
a
to be
really
careful because, like, like I've done this channel for a long time and I've met a lot of, you could say, influencers or profound spiritual teachers, and
hmm
a lot of them aren't as cracked up to be. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I understand that we're all human, we all have flaws, except that a lot of these people pretend that they don't. It's like really weird, and then they kind of, it's like the blind leading the blind, you know what I mean? And it can
hmm
be really dangerous, especially for impressionable minds. So I had that illusion shattered, and it was like, yeah, it was a crisis really, because everything that you believed in, you find out that it's horseshit, you know? So it's, yeah,
hmm
you
The
gotta be really,
age-old cycle.
yeah, man, the age-old cycle. So that's why I'm very,
I think that shows a
yeah.
really flexible mind, man. The fact that you analyzed traps that you were mentally in and then readjusted, like, that's a model for mental behavior, not to,
Yeah, it was
clap you up too much.
no, it was shattering, but at the same time, imagine if I didn't recourse my direction. You know what I mean? It would have been much
Mhm.
uglier. So
And surely you've gotten a glimpse of that as well, because, in my really short time doing this, I already have. Like, I can see the paths that form where you could be a fraud. Like, it's very
hmm
apparent. Like, people, there's just already this disproportionate relationship between you and the audience. And it's really ripe for sociopaths. So I don't know how many sociopaths are among us, but they would thrive in this area where they just are willing
oh,
to say complete falsities, make just everything, it's the easy
there's a
path.
lot. Yeah, you're right. It actually, especially I find that in the spiritual path, well, an influencer type spiritual teacher, it can attract a lot of like narcissistic psychopaths. And I'm not one to ever name names or gossip, because I think that's like actually a very demonic form of communication. It's not cool. But I
Mhm.
do like to just point out certain behaviors or I don't know, certain traps that people follow. And again, it's an age-old cycle, man. It happens every
Yeah,
generation.
man.
History is doomed to repeat itself, so you have to like really have a keen eye on what's happening.
So I kind of find myself, like, while I'm in the very, very early stages of my YouTube thing, just constantly almost self-flagellating, because out of a fear of seeming, any different than any of these other apes watching this on their screen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. How have you found your channel affecting your relationship with psychedelics? Do you find that it stayed the same, or do you find yourself tripping more because you want to make a video about it? Or even within the trip, do you find like, oh, I should take these philosophies down so I can make it, like, do you know what I mean? Has it affected your relationship with psychedelics?
I have not tripped more because of psychedelics yet. But what, if you're just analyzing the scenario and we're talking about the room for sociopaths, clearly in me and your position, what we could do if we were sociopaths would be to say we did a substance as repeatedly as possible. Say, I just did a crazy DMT trip.
True.
Be very articulate and woo-woo about it. And so I really have almost been going out of my way to not modify the way that I intake psychedelics. So that's why, despite the fact that people would love for me to do DMT, Tom, I mean, I'm sure people always ask, when are you going to do DMT next? Yeah.
We can talk about that for a bit.
Into these things, and I don't want to go into.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on...
What was that?
Have you done DMT before?
I have not in any significant dose. I've tried NN-DMT in a very tiny dose.
What are your thoughts on it? Do you feel trepidation going into it? Do you have any...
Yeah, I feel fear. Do
you think you are going to do it?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, I feel fear. I felt fear the first time that I did it in a very small dose because, one, I was alone and I had this very real fear of choking for some reason because I have a marijuana experience from my youth where I really almost choked on a gravity bong. And so I just had this fear that as I was going into DMT oblivion, I would also be choking. And that just really psyched me out going into it.
DMT, yeah, that's actually the one that, I don't know if it scares me the most, but definitely one of those top psychedelics that, I don't resonate with it right now. It just scares the bejesus out of me. I've had a few experiences before. Yeah, I just find it too... I don't know, because I've done ayahuasca like a fair few times, so I've got quite a bit of experience with that, and I just find it... I'd rather just do that if I wanted to do DMT. You know what I mean? I like that. It kind of, the experience lasts longer. You're able to absorb the experience a little bit more. And personally, I like the shamanic context. I like having like a shaman with tradition.
That's what I want to talk about.
Being with people. That's part of the thing. Because like, I'd get comments every now and again of like, why would you pay all this money and go to South America to drink ayahuasca when you can just order it yourself? But it's all about context. As you know, like the psychedelic itself is like a very tiny factor of it. It's about the setting, why you're doing it, who you're doing it with. And personally, like I said, I like just going in a group, having this shaman who's had generations of knowledge and tradition, and just being in that presence is like really powerful. Again, I'm just speaking personally. Personally speaking, I like that context,
Tom, I think you're onto what the future probably will have to be if psychedelics are going to be integrated, because there's this idea that psychedelics are healing, and there's a lot of scientific evidence to support that. But what some people crucially forget to mention is that very, very often these are in therapeutic clinical settings. Like all of the Johns Hopkins trials that are talking about these massive benefits on psilocybin for addiction and other things like that, these are done in the context of a preparatory phase with therapy during, and then therapy afterwards. So we cannot pretend that these are just these wonder pills that we need to get out to the masses as soon as possible. These are catalytic tools that we have to figure out how to smush into our culture for maximum healing. Exactly. These are not toys.
We don't want the 60s to repeat itself, and we have a whole wave of people going into psychosis and in a mental institution because they did it in a really irresponsible setting. That's always a possibility. So yeah, like you said, man, it's all about the context, and even all these scientific studies, like the psilocybin one, for example. And on top of that, that's not even studying the whole mushroom. That's isolating psilocybin, which is a different experience in and of itself. Same with MDMA. I just find it funny when they quote all these MDMA studies with veterans with PTSD, but it's like, but you're doing it in a rave. You don't have PTSD. And most, I don't know, because I live in Australia, so of course my bubble of experience is very limited, but most people who abuse MDMA truly get fucked up in the mind, like severe depression long term, and it's scary, man. It's actually, but it's not the drug itself. It's it's how you use it. But yeah,
absolutely. Let me fix my backlight here. Yeah, it's definitely a good sign that a drug shouldn't be overused. And anecdotal evidence and scientific evidence add up to show that it's not good for you in repeated, often doses.
Exactly. And actually, that brings me to a question about hanging up the phone, something that Alan Watts popularized. You know, like once you have a certain amount of experiences and you get the message that you should just leave it alone, in a sense. I'm butchering what he's saying, but, you know, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that psychedelics have I don't know, maybe a certain number, and that number could be different for each individual, but do you think there is a stage where you really should let it go? Or do you think that these are tools that can actually be used genuinely and practically for the rest of your days?
I think there probably will be a time that comes when it's time to hang it up, because if we talk about these substances, specifically like LSD and psilocybin, as these massively catalytic tools, then, I mean, it's really just common sense that how many times do you need a catalytic shift in your day-to-day life? How many times do you need to reset the framework and build from bottom up? There's always room for destruction and transformation, but infinite transformation is just chaos. So,
and there's a price for knowledge as well, you know, because you can always, people will
absolutely.
say but you can always learn something. It's like, yeah, of course, you can always gain knowledge, but there is a certain point, because I'm just speaking from my own personal journey, because I've had very troubling experiences where it was too much knowledge to the point where I was like, fuck, I wish, sometimes you wish you can go back and have that innocence in a way, and it's like, you want to just enjoy the journey where you're at instead of just trying to jump to the end and be this infinite knowledge wizard, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and what kind of itches at me is that, you know, most of these profound molecules like psilocybin and LSD and the rest, they're very similar to serotonin. And that kind of gives me this, it almost feels like a physiological hint that these are states that you could reach without it. I mean, it's not a coincidence that the most powerful psychedelics and these things giving us the most profound experience are so similarly shaped to our own neurotransmitter. Not sure what to make of that, but it clearly shows that there are analogs to these states without actually consuming these molecules.
Yeah, it seems like there's a more sustainable ways to do it. Because, like, listen, I'm at the stage now where I'm still gaining benefits from psychedelics, but even then, I take them so rarely. Some people think that just because I have this channel, I must trip all the time, but no, opposite. In fact,
People,
the more
the
more experience I have, the less I do it. The more I respect these substances, the more trepidation I tend to have, you know? But it's out of respect.
I was going to say,
yeah.
People also assume every new video you're tripping. I mean, the people say, I think you're tripping too much, when I just made a video talking about some of the benefits of psilocybin. So I want it to be known that I haven't done psilocybin in, you know, half a year. And because last time it scared the hell out of me. It beat me down to the ground, told me that I was an egotistical fraud, and just basically told me to take a break. Let's just say that.
Do you think that having a channel talking about psychedelics, teaching the masses, make it like, I don't know, maybe you're more prone to get punished in this way for egotistical reasons?
I think if you do have a teacher mentality, then you're definitely going to get punished, because my mentality is more like I'm doing bioassays of substances and kind of just telling you what my experience was like. I don't feel that, maybe once I'm a master's graduate or something like that, I'll feel a lot more comfortable with really calling myself like a pharmacology educator and things like that.
Right.
But at the moment, any education I'm doing is basically by someone saying, oh, I'm not going to do that now, or I saw what happened to him. I really can't stand on my soapbox yet and truly talk about what psychedelics are like for everybody.
Yeah, still in the beginner stages. I feel like that as well.
Yeah.
So I think at the start, I don't think I ever had like, oh, I'm a teacher or I'm an expert. Never like that, but maybe subconsciously I did. I don't know, just looking back.
I might too, when I reflect on it, you know, like it's something that can creep up.
Yeah. I think like now that's why I have more of a kind of documentary filmmaker approach, and just.
I like that, man. You make super high quality stuff.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Like, it's like Vice level. It's very strange to see these, I don't know. I'm kind of obsessed with this view of how, let's say, archaeologists in 100 years will see our time. And they're just going to see this massive output of mobile creativity. Like the fact that my entire channel's on my phone, the fact that you had mostly mobile equipment to go record all the stuff that you did. Like, you didn't need this giant on the shoulder, you know, camera and things like that. you're putting out with ratings similar to some news channels this mobile content that's informative. It's really interesting.
It's interesting
to realize
position.
our time and place.
Yeah, it's an interesting position to be in. I feel like I even have like a little bit of an anthropologist type of approach. That's why it's not even all about psychedelics. Like, for example, I did a documentary on the toxic weed epidemic in Chile, in South America, and I went to like the ghetto streets, picked up like this toxic weed and kind of interviewing people living that life. Like, I love those kind of raw human perspectives, you know, and not trying to give like this is what this means scientifically or historically. Like, no, I'm just pure raw perspective, I guess, you know.
Does that trip you out though, that you're giving these like, you're almost giving these like glimpses, you know, into these things that would not have been glimpsed otherwise, like maybe in another context or another documentary, but the moments and the people that you feature, it really does kind of, you know, tickle the timeline a little bit when I think about it.
It's really weird, and just kind of looking back on it, it's like, it all makes sense, because like growing up, I was always dabbling in the dark arts and kind of living in the underworld in a lot of ways, getting into like drugs and hanging out with shady characters. And then I went through my spiritual awakening, completely got away from that. But even now, I think a lot of these people have stories to tell, and I think we can learn a lot from even the harshest place of the world that I think a lot of people shy away from. And I see this a lot in spirituality, where we're overly focused on the positive and the beauty, but then we shy away from like the ugliness, you know, the evil, the suffering.
The failure of polarity. We're not being polar.
Yeah, what do? We call it an illusion, right? Oh, evil doesn't exist, because that way, if I say that, I don't have to deal with it, you know? When just because...
Think about how quickly...
Oh, sorry, I'll just say this one thing. It's like, good and evil, like, yes, it's relative, but it doesn't mean that these forces don't have a real effect on human beings. You know what I mean? Like, just because something is relative, it doesn't mean that it's not real. I think that's a big misconception in woo-woo, modern, new age spirituality. But yeah, what were you going to say?
Oh, you just had me excited with your train of thought there. I was just thinking, you notice nobody ever, many modern Christians, you might say, would dismiss notions of hell and things like that, but people are not as quick to throw away the idea of heaven. People are very fast to throw away the suffering and the eternal torment. That's silly. That could never exist. But, you know, the eternal afterlife with the eternal donuts and things of that nature, we have no problem, maybe, you know, being open-minded to. But hell, no way. That's foolish. That's child thinking.
Yeah, can't be. But then even hell, like, it's real on this plane, man. You just have to travel, look around. The hell is real. Fucking real, man, and it's a bottomless pit. And of course, there's different approaches. Like, you can have a more fear-mongering approach, like do good or you're going to burn in hell forever, or just kind of like, hey, you know, don't let the fear consume you, but at the same time, you got to acknowledge it, because if you don't acknowledge the darkness or the shadow, then it's going to grow in this really ugly way. And that's why so many spiritual gurus, actually one recently, I won't say the name, but a lot of spiritual gurus end up sexually, attacking young women, because they're celibate, and they repress that shit so much, and they build themselves up to be like this perfect being, enlightened being who's in touch with all the goodness of the world. And because they're so actively repressing all the darkness, then it grows in ugly ways, you know. So that's why it's always important, at least for me, to not give it power. Of course not. Always be rooted in your light and your love, your compassion, but at least acknowledge it, man. Like,
I mean, it's like, if we can envision a utopia where everything is as maximally good as it could be, then we can easily envision where we're all the product of our own mistakes and suffering and insecurities and everything of that negative nature.
Yeah, man. And I've had some heavy psychedelic trips where I would get tapped into the collective suffering of humanity and live out lives. Like, for example, live out like a homeless person. How would they feel? Or an old person who has no loved ones. He's just estranged from his family, living with regret on his deathbed, on the hospital, dying alone, or living as a child African soldier who's high on meth and forced to kill his own father. You know, just shit like that. And that's just like 3 little tiny examples of the totality. Like, it's heavy, man. It's so heavy to the point where you're just begging the psychedelic for it to stop. Like, please make this stop. This is too much. I understand, but
I think I think that's why I'm so sucked into philosophies that start by basically just asserting that life is suffering. Like, of course,
Hmm.
Buddhism might call suffering many different things, but generally they say suffering. Stoicism just asserts that you're really just pushing the rock uphill and being diligent despite suffering. All of
Hmm.
these things are attractive to me because they seem to acknowledge the first universal truth and then kind of move outward from there. Because happiness is definitely something that comes into your life, but it seems much more likely that suffering is, I guess I would just say suffering is more easily provable than
Oh yeah.
than joy and happiness.
Well, in happiness, that's part of the polarity. To have happiness, it's
Hmm.
already attached to sadness. I think peace is
Yeah.
probably a better or a more practical emotion to chase after if you're going to chase after something, because it's like the balance of everything.
Hmm.
Because I went through an ayahuasca trip where, well, the previous one I asked for like understanding and service and not like these big connotations, and then it was like, but with knowledge, of course, it's too much. So then
You
the
scared
next,
me, Tom. I was
yeah,
kind of thinking those same words before I went into mine.
yeah. Just be careful what you wish for, because you will get what you wanted.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I don't want to like influence how you approach these things, but at the same time I'm like, oh, I don't know, not knowledge. It's infinite, man. It's infinite. There's actually an old Marvel comic where Thor, he asked for infinite knowledge, and he ended up getting both his eyes taken out because it's too much.
Hmm.
You can't
Isn't
bear
that
that
scene in
shit.
Indiana Jones as well with the crystal skull where he's just taking in all this ancient knowledge and
Yeah, what was that? Wasn't that relating to the covenant or something in the Bible? I've heard that too. Like
I don't know.
it's like God. I don't know. Maybe the knowledge or the power of God is too much that man, for them to touch it,
Yeah.
you're gonna get destroyed by it. It's too much. That
I
that was
think
part
that's
of my
probably touching on the archetype of awe at the all, we would call,
the all.
That's
Yep.
sort of what it seems like.
I think that's a good name as well. I like that. Just the
I
all.
love the all. That's a great
Yeah.
term.
The all.
Yeah.
Even like God, I had a big problem with, because I think probably like many people these days, they grow up Catholic, and then just by that very fact, you have to rebel against it. So then I turned super atheist, and then I found that just as dumb as
Oh, yeah.
being a hardcore Catholic. So then I became agnostic. Well, oh, I don't know. But then again, that's just being a fence sitter. You don't want to be a fence sitter, because then you'll be stuck in limbo.
Hmm.
You're not going to have any conviction in your life, So yeah, it's just interesting.
Hmm.
But now integrating all the religions, even Catholicism, man, or Christianity, it's got a lot of powerful principles that even Hermetic law supports, But it's like every religion.
I
Like
was really
there's some
weirded
good
out.
there's some good stuff in all of it. I like Christianity insofar as it's like you have your suffering, but it's like you want to carry that shit. You want to, I don't know, like use it for something positive, fight for good, fight evil, shit like that. It has more purpose to it versus just like,
Hmm.
everything's an illusion. Don't worry about it. Just meditate under a tree. And that has value too, but there's context. It's all about context and where you are in your life, I guess. Or maybe not. I
Yeah,
don't know.
man.
I could be full of shit. That's a possibility.
Are we both full of shit?
Probably.
I'm a big fan of Christianity symbolically. Like, I'm a really
Yeah.
big fan of some of these symbols. Like, they really do feel like they reach what Jordan Peterson would call like the peak of symbolism, and the peak, like when you have God being represented in the form of a man voluntarily taking on the maximum suffering for everybody else, and that being redemptive. Like, I don't have any claims as to whether that occurred or didn't. I really don't care all that much, but the symbol is deeply powerful, I think.
Very powerful, man. Actually, I'm obsessed with Dragon Ball Z at the moment, and that has a lot of
Yeah.
ties with Christian principles. And just looking back on it now, I was like, oh fuck, no wonder that it's such a cultural phenomenon, because it touches on like these deep core truths of humanity, and what it means to be human. And it's inspiring. That's what I like about Christianity, like you said, the
It's fun.
symbology. Like I wasn't there, 2,000 years ago, so I don't know what the fuck happened. So I'm not gonna
Don't
attach
ask me.
myself to. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't there, but it does definitely. A lot of the symbology resonates with how I approach life now.
That's what got me interested in Joseph Campbell, was the fact that I noticed in my own life, like the certain fantasy tropes and themes that I was drawn towards. Some of them explicitly masculine, like ideas of being the last warrior on the battlefield with his sword, on the field. Like, even you could probably kind of imagine that as this amazing scenario.
Yeah.
It was just so interesting for me to learn that these were deep archetypes that were cross-cultural. Like that really shook me. And I guess it shouldn't have, because we're all so similar after all.
Yeah, Joseph Campbell, man, he touched on something so profound. And I think even the hero's journey, you could even go back to Jesus. He's like the OG hero's journey in a lot of ways. I'm sure maybe there's someone before that, but like...
And so the question...
Pretty good one.
Yeah, so the question would be like, did Joseph Campbell sort of construct this system of the hero's journey, or did he notice a pattern that keeps repeating itself for the last 10,000 or more years? You know what I mean?
Principle of rhythm.
He just noticed what we were doing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's like, yeah, like, you know, you talk about these archetypes and principles and natural laws, and they just manifest themselves differently, especially now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're, again...
It's interesting to...
Interesting times. Strange times, but interesting times.
Strange times, my friend.
Yeah, man. What are your thoughts on, because I wanted to ask your opinion on this, on synthetic versus organic psychedelic substances. Do you think there is some sort of like drawbacks from having synthetic isolated compounds versus having a plant that's, you know, more, maybe works more holistically? Or I don't know, like, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So I went both ways on this at first, because, you know, as coming kind of from the chemistry background, you want to say at first, hey, look, if we take the molecule out of the plant and then I take the molecule, you know, so whatever, it's the same thing. But, you know, when we really reflect on these things, and we think about how cultures have integrated some of these plants and substances, we realize that these aren't molecules that these cultures were selecting for. Maybe there was a few desired molecules, but it was really this entire conglomeration of molecules. You know, when you take in the entire cannabis plant, or you take in the entire mushroom, we have no idea what the biochemistry could truly be there. Like, the one thing I've learned by working in biochemistry labs is that research on receptor sites and binding mechanisms is very slow, and we're still trying to paint the complete picture. One good example that will show you how far along we are in truly understanding things at this level is that when I load the model of the ribosome on my computer, it just completely freezes. Like, we have billions of these in our body, and I can't even render it without hydrogens attached. So, I mean, complexity forever.
We don't know shit. In other words.
So I guess if I had to wrap that up, I would say there's probably something we don't understand about the cross interactions of this group of molecules versus just them being isolated. And I think you may have a good perspective on this, because you've dabbed marijuana concentrates, right?
No, I purposely avoid dabbing, just because, like, even now I probably smoke too much weed as it is now. I don't want to raise the threshold of what it could mean to get super high, and then now my normal, I don't know, me having a normal joint, for example, it just doesn't cut it anymore. I'd rather not expand that. Yeah, that reality. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I went down that path, my friend.
Okay.
I went down that path about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago now. I spent the entire year only doing cannabis concentrates. And on this journey, I basically I wasn't smoking any flower whatsoever.
Damn.
And this is mostly due to the fact that I have access to dispensaries and things like that. I can just go to the store and get it.
You lucky bastard. We still have to do
it. I know, I'm a lucky boy. Anyway, man, so I went down this journey of like obsession with having the highest THC percentage, you know, like you just always associate that. You're like, I would love 30%, 50%, something crazy, you know? So finally I worked my way all the way up to 99.9% THCA crystalline extract. Okay. This is something that is it looks like snowflakes in a glass. This is pure white, and I dabbed it and I was disappointed. And so it was at this moment, after finally climbing this ladder of THC concentration, I realized it's not really about any one molecule. I love the plant because it's this big association of molecules. And so I basically have climbed all the way back down to just smoking good old cannabis after getting to the top of that mountain and finding nothing of value.
Going back to the spirit of it, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, the spirit of it. And a manageable dose.
So do you think that in a way, symbolically or literally, however you want to think about it, do you think that isolating a compound is kind of killing the spirit in a way versus just ingesting the original plant in its natural
My guess
form?
would be it's both. So there's probably instances where cultures that are taking something are actually really only selecting for one or two molecules. But
Mm-hmm.
in the case of things like ayahuasca and, these deeply ingrained cultural plant medicines, I would say it's almost certainly better to just take them in completely in their entirety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people forget that Mother Nature is a pretty
That'd be my
amazing
guess.
chemist, right? She knows what she's doing.
Yeah, it's great you say that, really, because that's been the naturally selected form of that plant. So why not just ingest it in the way that has been selected for?
But maybe as well, there's, like context is everything, I suppose. And maybe there are certain contexts where isolating a compound could be better for a certain use, more like designer drugs.
Like most medicine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like if we're going to make a pharmacy medicine, people don't need to also get the cocoa leaf in there with the heart medication,
Exactly. So it depends what you use it for, I suppose. But I find it interesting with the plants versus the synthetic drugs, because I've always found, even with THC, because I've done like THC oil and stuff, and I like it. It was more potent, got me more stoned, but I just don't think it lights a candle to just having the plant in its original form. At least with weed, anyway. I just prefer
I agree, and I disagreed at first. And it was also very interesting to I would observe as I would bring THC extracts to parties and stuff like that versus when I would bring cannabis. And it was pretty undisputed that when you bring cannabis to a party, it might kill the party down a little bit, but it absolutely will kill the party when you bring concentrates. Like, people are just sleeping on the couch. I have hilarious memories of prom night where a man is just sleeping next to the pool and he's just unconscious for his prom night from too high of THC extract.
Jesus. Yeah, that's crazy,
Yeah,
man. I could only imagine in the US as well, you guys get like, you guys are taking it too far, I feel.
I'm about to take it too far too. I'm about to get into the industry once I can.
Nice. Well, when the borders are open, I'll fly over and we'll do something. That'll be sick.
Oh yeah, man, you got it. Tom's whenever you come over.
Yeah. Well, actually, for those listening at home, me and Quentin were actually about to go to Mexico and do a peyote ceremony together and ayahuasca and all these things. But obviously, this whole Rona-virus kind of destroyed those plans. But
the round boy got us.
I always like to look at the positive of everything, and I think it's maybe a good thing just to kind of delay this thing. Gives me a little bit more extra time to prepare. Because peyote, I've never done peyote. I don't know about you, but it seems like it's no joke. So I need to really, if I have a couple extra months to prepare, it's probably a good thing.
I really just try to trust that this is easy to say when it's nothing like the loss of a loved one, but I really do try to trust the workings of the universe. As cringy and cliche as that is, I have found great success in just kind of, trying to be ethically upright, but then ultimately just letting it play out, letting it go.
Exactly. Because then you trusting something bigger than yourself in a lot of ways. And I think it's practical as well. Like, if you find the positive, your mind's gonna kind of focus in how do I say this? Whatever you focus on is going to manifest itself. So if you're focusing on the positive, how can this help me? Or if you're in this space of gratitude, then life is generally going to be better versus just why did this happen to me? And you start being in this victim mentality, and then you start to point out all the negative things that have happened because of this thing. I don't know. I just don't find it very practical.
I think in Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, he said basically even chance is not divorced from providence, just meaning that even the random horrible things that occur are not separated from basically divine unraveling of the universe.
Exactly. What are your thoughts on peyote? Have you done mescaline or San Pedro or any cactus?
I haven't. I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on it and, being respectful, but being observant and seeing how they differ.
I've done San Pedro before a few times. That was actually the experience.
Did you do it at Arcana?
I did it last time, but I did it also 5 years ago when I first did ayahuasca. And that was the psychedelic that gave me the insight to start a blog and a YouTube channel, and it gave me more direction in life. So it was it was interesting because I find that the cactus, and I would assume that peyote is similar but more intense from what I've heard. Jose, actually, he calls peyote, it's San Pedro's crazy Mexican cousin. Which I haven't done peyote, but I was like, okay,
I'm not scared at all.
Yeah, right. But I found it has the shamans believe it has more of a masculine presence to it versus ayahuasca, which is more feminine. And I can see how, like, relating Hermetic philosophy to masculinity and femininity, I can see how ayahuasca is a lot more cosmic. It's a lot more like you got to interpret what's going on. It's more symbolic and it can be harsher, like the lessons. Whereas San Pedro is a lot more, it's direct, it's more grounded, it's more matter of fact. Like this is what's going on. Whereas ayahuasca, you got to kind of put the pieces together. It's kind of like a woman, right? They expect you to be a detective. They don't tell you exactly what's going on.
What I did want to ask you, because you've had so many of these experiences in this ritualistic ceremonial context, I wanted to ask you how you think that would look or could look if it was brought into, say, the United States. Like, I'm aware that centers exist currently kind of, below the table where you can do these sorts of things, but I really am obsessed with what this would look like in modernity, because I don't believe that these should just be next to liquor. I don't think you should just be grabbing LSD tabs without any preemptive warning whatsoever.
No.
But it's clear that in the ceremonial context you've been in, these could have massive benefit.
Massive, yeah. I think how is it going to be integrated in Western society? It's a good question. I think it's probably going to be a mixture of traditional shamanic practices, but also Western psychotherapy context. Yeah. As long as the person who is giving you the psychedelic is a master at it, and I don't mean master in the sense of, you have to grow up in some remote island on the Amazon and you have to have this specific tradition, but just dedicate your whole life to understanding this plant. I feel like that's, as long as that's covered, not just some, I don't know, fucking Davo at the pharmacy
Joe Schmo
center. Yeah, exactly. Just giving you this thing. And I don't know, because I think, you probably experienced this with psychedelics. You open yourself to the multiverse, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
And, sometimes
absolutely
nasty things can slip in if you don't do it in the right context. That's what I believe anyway. There is good and bad energies out there, and you just got to be careful, I guess. It's like the law of polarity. The fact that psychedelics can give you such profound healing and unprecedented results with psychotherapy, but the potential of the negative is horrific. It's like the fucking more horrible than all drugs. I feel like the worst case scenarios of psychedelics. So that
it's almost like all they can guarantee is a transformative state, and it's up for us to mold that. That's sort of what it feels like to me.
Extreme polarity, and we don't know anything about psychedelics. Like, man,
nothing.
We stopped research for like 40 years, and we've just started to pick up the book again and trying to study these things. Like, we don't even know what consciousness is, let alone psychedelics. So I think that we don't know shit. We're toddlers, not even toddlers, babies at this stage of
I'm obsessed with this because I came from the perspective. Sorry, man, I lagged a bit.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say. Lost my train of thought. What were you talking about?
About what was I talking about? Oh, the extreme polarity of psychedelics and how they have the, really good potential to heal, but also, the negative side of that too.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that. I started off as such a strict materialist and just thinking that everything could be explained by physical phenomena, and this receptor being interacted with this way and these downstream things occurring. But then I started looking into it, and I'm not, I'm just an undergraduate research student. I'm nothing big yet. But what seems clear is that we know a lot of physical phenomena is occurring in the mind, and we know about these interactions, but doesn't get us to subjective experience whatsoever. Like knowing that psilocybin binds to the 5-HT2A site tells me nothing about why I was sent into Aztec memes. You know what I mean? That tells me nothing about that whatsoever. And then they might respond like someone interested in neurology might say, well, we know that this pathway is affected in this memory system, and they'll show you a really pretty image of the mind with certain areas highlighted and certain areas not. But as you keep digging into it, you just keep finding correlations between physical phenomena that never get you to subjective experience. So that's what kind of sucked me into the hard problem of consciousness and sort of made me a bit less dogmatic about materialism.
I completely relate to you, because I'm still a skeptic now, but before I was a materialist, scientific skeptic. And yeah, like, you know, I studied engineering, so I know that's like
you're
hard.
Kindred spirit.
Yeah, it's a very hard-headed materialist form of thinking of the world, and just kind of reducing everything to atoms and molecules. But what's behind that? There's a mind behind that we can't explain. You know, there's so much more to this life that we just have no idea about. And like you said, like, how does psilocybin attaching to the serotonin receptors, how does that explain anything subjectively? It's still good to learn.
Nothing.
It's still good to learn, because maybe that can lead us into a much greater understanding, but it doesn't say shit. It doesn't mean anything. And I think a lot of the times people have these really like long-winded fancy ways of saying something, but it's, at the end of the day, that doesn't help me right now. Like, if you're in a bad trip, if you're in the multiverse, getting access to all these dimensions, like, how the fuck does knowledge of molecules going to help you in that moment?
Yeah, exactly, right?
Who knows?
Yeah, actually, there's nothing you can tell me about neurons interacting that tells me why they know that they're neurons interacting.
Yeah, and that's what I like about Hermetic philosophy, because they believe that everything, you know, the law of mentalism, the first principle, how everything has a mind. For phenomena to exist on any plane, it has to come from a causal realm or something preceding that. And we're talking about masculinity and femininity, the principle of gender. Interesting way of explaining it is that the masculine principle is the blueprint of the building, whereas the feminine principle is the building. See, when you see a building, you don't see the blueprint or what the intention behind that. All you see is the physical phenomena. And maybe it's similar to molecules or neurons. There's a mind behind that we can't quite perceive. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, once I realized that I was using nothing but intuition to know that you're conscious, I pretty much lost my mind, Tom. Like, I pretty much lost my mind the moment I realized that we have correlations between physicals. I lost my mind once I realized that we have all these amazing physical correlations between conscious experience and brain states. You know, if I give you anesthesia, you seem to lose your consciousness and you come back. And yet none of that gets us to why matter is self-knowing in the first place. Like, I just can't. I'm sure this is something people have hit their head against for centuries.
Probably for a much longer time, we're going to be banging our heads trying to figure this out. But it's fun trying, man. It's fun trying.
It is.
Just because we don't know, it doesn't mean that we can't. It's just when people get too dogmatic and too attached to their ideas, that's when we get into a bit of trouble. But that being said, everyone has their roles, and what I like about the hardcore skeptics is that stops the mystic from flying too close to the sun. You know what I mean? Like, it keeps us grounded. But if we were too grounded, then we would never move. We'd just stay stagnant for the rest of eternity. When it's the dreamers and the mystics who get the ball moving. You know what I mean? Like, the skeptic would be like, "There's no evidence for that, therefore I'm just going to stay in my little bubble." And you know, like, I don't know. You got to try and just try. I don't know. Just try and just explore, man. Try to figure this shit out. Why not? What else?
I'm sort of the mind. Well, what am I of the mind of? Lost my train of thought. I knew exactly until I didn't.
Yeah, man. That's pretty much life right there.
Yeah, it sure is.
What are your plans anyway for the channel? Like, are you just going to continue? Is your theme of your YouTube channel like psychedelics, or is it more like chronicling your human journey and just whatever you feel like talking about? Or are you going to focus more on psychedelics?
I think I'm going to focus entirely on psychedelics because I'm obsessed with the hypocrisy in our culture where they're not allowed to be implemented in any context whatsoever. And yet we have many substances, I could go on for days about it, that are allowed for the public. So I feel almost like I owe it to whatever this movement might shape into, to just use, to whatever ability I have a platform, to use that for the organization of the reversal of this. Like, this really annoys me, Tom. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's just my anti-authoritarian personality, but it's something I feel like we might be able to change with communities online. With the sufficient organization, I think we could probably avoid some of the mistakes of the last attempted revolution.
Yeah, I think.
And so, where am I?
Sorry, go on.
No worries, man. And so, where my channel's going right now, I'm sort of interested in some of Alexander Shulgin, a legendary psychedelic chemist. For anybody who doesn't know, going through some of his books, P-Cal and T-Cal, and trying some of the substances that he bioassayed himself. And I kind of want to bring this back to life, his spirit and sort of the idea of being adventurous with safe substances. I find that an interesting thing to begin to attempt.
Yeah, he synthesized 2CB. That's one that I've always, because I don't know why, maybe I have a bias just against synthetic psychedelics, but 2CB is one that I really want to experience.
Yeah, I just got out of my first 2CB trip.
And how was that? Let's say,
like about a week or two ago.
I hate to ask you to just compare it to another psychedelics, but that's all I have is reference.
Oh, I will, man. I'll compare it.
How do you compare that to mushrooms and LSD?
Man, it was so strange because the come up felt not indistinguishable, but so close to the mushroom nausea light feeling I get. Sometimes I get tingly, or your stomach has butterflies, just that kind of uncomfortable feeling building up.
You're stepping into that other world. You just feel yourself crossing over,
man.
Like, oh shit, what am I going to get myself into?
Totally. Yeah. And speaking of like the principal polarity, it basically went from that, like I'm laying on my bed, to a complete reversal to almost this, not an LSD like headspace, but if you're asking me to compare, it is like that, where you're still sort of there a little bit. You're kind of feeling a bit analytical, but it was very mystical to me. I don't know why. I had this very powerful spiritual experience with trees in my backyard. So I think I've primed myself a bit too much for plant interactions, because I keep running into these things at every instance.
Do you know how 2CB is synthesized? What plant does it originally come from?
I believe the mescaline derivative. So Alexander Shulgin was sort of looking at the base structure of mescaline itself, and then he came up with a substituted derivative. So if you look at them, they're pretty dang similar. I believe mescaline has a few extra methoxy groups hanging off, maybe just one. Actually,
which plant was that mescaline derived from? Do you know? Like, was it from a specific
I'm not sure.
cactus, or just whatever, or mescaline, just mescaline?
I think if it's the molecule mescaline, I don't believe it matters necessarily.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Because it's a derivative from that. So. Yeah. Oh, it's interesting. But San Pedro is really interesting. I think that you'd like that one. It's like really gentle. It's heart opening, grounded. You're just in tune with reality. You're not going to unless you like going to the cosmos. I'm in a different stage in my life where I like to be on Earth. I like the Earth plane. I like the human. That's when I freak out, is when I start leaving the human and go to realms that I just can't understand. I don't know. Maybe it's that fear that all humans have of leaving this realm or leaving to a world that we just don't understand. That's what I get afraid of. Because if I'm going to, let's say, I don't know, an alien planet with all these different entities, I don't know how they work. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they trying to fuck with me? Are they trying to give me knowledge? There's too many question marks. I don't know. And that skeptic in me kind of has to always question that. Like, what the fuck? This is gonna.
Definitely.
I don't know.
So you've had a lot of outside this realm type of experiences. I would say that in my domain, a lot of them have been very, very earthly. Like, they were very spiritual, but I feel like I've been stuck on this plane, or maybe they want me on this plane. I don't know. But even my first magic mushroom trip, which is really funny, just picture this materialist story. So kind of stuffy, like 18-year-old who's thinks he kind of understands that this molecule is just going to give him some strange effects. And so I naively took 10 dried grams of psilocybin cubensis. Do not do this. This is not a recommendation. I've never taken a dose this high again since then.
Yeah, no shit.
My friend. My friend, yes.
10 grams. That's
um,
ridiculous. Yeah, go on.
so it basically, long story short, it catapulted me into a tree melding experience where I'm just being basically coached by Gaia for like 7 hours while I lose my identity on this beach
Oh,
that I was at alone.
did you were you going through
Terrible.
like psychosis or things like that?
I mean, I would call that diagnosable psychosis. The
Yeah.
fact that it was positive doesn't make it not psychosis. So
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
yeah, no, the experience was actually not negative for me. The come up was negative because I felt like I just poisoned myself, but I think it just hit me so hard that I was just shattered into oblivion. Like I became an ape in the
Mm,
woods, and I didn't even know my name. I didn't understand the idea of having a car.
damn.
It ended with
Yeah.
my ex-girlfriend finding me. I was just covered in dirt. She just found me
Oh,
where I told her I would be.
that's crazy. I know how you feel, man, because that just going to that primal instinct part of yourself, and like normal concepts like friend or Tom or just normal words just lose all meaning, and you're like, fuck, I've lost my mind, I
Yes,
guess. I've had a
I
great,
wouldn't give my keys away.
yeah, I've had a crazy, had a 7.5 dried psilocybin mushroom experience, and
Um,
and I did it in silent darkness by myself.
my friend.
In silent darkness. So just there's one thing being in nature, which at least anchors you to some
Yeah.
degree, where you can at least one. Because I've tripped balls where at least if I'm in nature, it forces me to be present and I can interact with the external world. But in silent darkness, dude, forget about it. You're not there anymore.
You must have gone to Mordor.
I did. No, for real. It was actually terrifying. That was the last time I had such a big dose, and that scared me from mushrooms for about 3 years. And then 3 years after that experience, I literally one cubensis mushroom, and I was climbing trees in nature. And now I have a different approach. I don't subscribe to the silent darkness Terence McKenna method anymore.
Uh-huh.
I think it's still like, listen, if you're like, I don't know, if you're 40 years old and you're
You
like
want
a
to do it,
martial artist expert and you're like fucking really on top of your mental gains, then sure, I'm sure you could handle such a big experience. But for like someone like me, some young kid, no fucking way, man. I think it can be really
my
dangerous.
ego wants to do it. Hold me back from
Yeah.
it. Tell me not to do
Don't do
it. My ego says,
do
"Oh
it.
man, that'd
Do
be
it.
Tom,
Nah, don't do it.
Tom's
Don't do
weak."
it. Do it. Do it. Yeah, and the species that I had, the ones that grow in Victoria, they're native to Victoria, Australia, and New Zealand. They're called Psilocybe
I trust
subaeruginosus.
no Australian mushrooms, bro.
Don't trust
Those are
it.
gonna take you out.
They're one of the most potent mushrooms in the world, like legit. Some would even say they have
Yeah.
the potential to be the most potent mushroom in the world. And it's fucking crazy, man. No, don't do that. 7.5
So you were
grams.
just taken on a ride, huh?
Yeah, I went on a. I went. I even had like a bit of an ayahuasca experience, which I found really interesting. Ever since I've had my ayahuasca experience, my first one, ever since I had following mushroom doses, it kind of opens up this ayahuasca portal, where this, I don't know what you want to call it, the spirit of ayahuasca or the shaman world. It's very accessible to me now. So I could
You
have,
know,
yeah, I could have a tiny mushroom dose, and I will feel like I'm on ayahuasca. I don't need much. Yeah, I found it's really weird, and even chemically they're very similar. And there was an interesting scientific
I was
discovery
about to
on
say that.
mushrooms which found an MAOI in it. So it's got an MAOI
Oh,
and psilocybin, which is very structurally similar to
wow.
DMT. Well, psilocin is structurally similar to DMT, but there you go.
Yeah. I was just about to try to get that in really quick. That yeah, I'm not surprised actually that even though I haven't done ayahuasca, that you can kind of see similarities between these realms because they are so structurally similar. And it's
Mm,
tricky when if someone's coming from a no chemistry background, it's not reliable enough to see two things that are look kind of similar. But in my somewhat educated opinion, they are very very similar molecules.
very.
Um,
I find
very
that
similar.
those two are the most similar plants that I've ever had in my life. Like to me,
Really?
having mushrooms is like what I could imagine is like drinking ayahuasca in daytime. Like that's,
Hmm.
I don't know. Sometimes I'm tripping on ayahuasca and I feel like I'm on a high dose of mushrooms. Let me make it clear though that the similarity is high dose psilocybin, not low dose. That's a different experience
Yeah.
altogether.
This
Yeah,
isn't
it,
your old
it might
microdose.
it might as well just be a different drug. That's what I found really interesting about psilocybin is that once you have those really high doses, it's like, oh, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. This is something else. I feel like low dose mushrooms is like this cute little girl you find and you follow her into the forest, and then the 5 grams is like actually it's attached to this big tentacle monster or some shit. Like it's just much scarier than what you thought. It was like innocent children laughing and playing. That's low dose mushrooms, and the big doses like.
Man, I was a long time ago on 1 or 2 grams of mushrooms. You know, I'm laughing at Google images of squids for like 2 to 3 hours, and you know, I take 10 grams and I'm melting into a tree, Tom. Like
exactly, like different experience. And I had to get my girlfriend to save me as well, just to be there. Just crying my eyes out, man. I remember actually having my physical body disintegrating into nothingness, and the one of the hardest parts. This sounds really horrific, and it was. I'm okay now. I learned from it, of course, but at the time it was terrifying. I felt my teeth falling out, and I could feel it, like physically, my teeth breaking apart, and that's like one of my worst nightmares, right? Having that sensation.
Yeah, dude.
It's fucking really bad, man. And just
my
ego was just resisting. It was basically like the mushroom trying to take me, and my ego was just clawing onto this physical reality with all its might, like, you know, it's fingernails like breaking apart across the wall from trying to grab on. Like that's how it felt like. And I've learned since then actually, and you know, we're talking about roles. Everyone has their different roles and what they're supposed to do in this life. But I am here to be on Earth. So I have gotten told by the psychedelic gods themselves. I'm not saying this as a general thing, but for me personally, you don't need to come here. Like, I mean, yeah, of course, take psychedelics, you can gain perspective, but you're here to stay in this earth realm and help humans. Like, you're not here to just travel to the cosmos. That's for maybe other people and their roles. And maybe that's why I've always struggled with having like really high doses and getting detached from this reality. Maybe, I don't know. That's just...
Yeah.
I'm just
in the midst of my 2CB insanity. That's weird, Tom. I was just speaking to the psychedelic gods too the other day. And they did give me this crazy impression that I was this is, of course, you know, I'm in basically drug psychosis, that I'm a part of the tree kingdom. Like they were just like, by the way, you're part of the tree kingdom, and we're gonna just kind of prep you here because you're in the earth realm. Like it didn't feel like I was from another planet. It felt like I was associated with this cycle of plant life, and I was like, well, if that's my lot, then so be it.
It's so interesting, man. Like even, you know, talking about staying in the earth realm, and I've gone to like cosmic realms, but only very few times. Like probably the high dose of mushrooms, which to me was like, it was like an elongated peak DMT experience. To me, after having that high dose mushroom experience, DMT is like nothing. That's like child's play compared to this.
Was your ego just like putty with that blonde?
Putty.
Like, did you just like
completely
Tom
putty?
just,
like
what's Tom?
I wouldn't be able to string like a full sentence together, and that would freak me out. Just like, oh my God, am I going to lose my mind forever? Am I going to integrate back into reality? And then I would see myself like in a mental institution and going crazy, and then feeling the pain of my mother, of losing her son that's lost his mind, taking these drugs, like, and you feel kind of stupid, and you're just flooded with regret, like, what the fuck? Why would I do? Of course this happened. Why would I do this to myself? Just kind of beating myself down. But that was like, yeah, I've learned since then for sure. But it definitely gave me a bigger appreciation for sanity, this human realm. And just, yeah, man, I've learned a lot from it.
Not annihilation.
Because I can see how that experience can scar a lot of people, but like I said, it's better to take the positive out of everything instead of just letting it beat you down. So, I guess that was my own little spiritual ego trip, and that really made me think about psychedelics and approach them a little bit differently. I was too gung-ho. I'm like, yes, I want to explore the bigger realms. Let's see what 7.5 grams is like, or try this psychedelic. Whereas now I'm like, I have too much respect for them to like go there, really. Like I'll wait for, like, for example, like this Mexico trip, you know, I like that kind of context, like being able to take peyote in the sacred deserts of Mexico with a guide, or ayahuasca with a master shaman. Like, I know that not everyone resonates with this type of context, but to me, it's like one of the best, if not the best way to take psychedelics. I don't even want to say best, because there's a lot of ego attached to that, but my preferred way, where I can feel safe and I can let myself go in these environments without having that survival instinct kicked in. Because imagine like you took 10 grams in nature, like you.
So every time I think about it, I just think about what a bad idea it was, and I picture when I was eating them, and I wish I could just go back. And not, I mean, actually, I don't, but I would have gone back and be screaming at my old self.
And what did you learn from that trip? Well, what are the positives that you got from that?
I was ground down, Tom. Like, I mean, ground. Okay, so I was laying at a beach riverside, and as I'm at the base of this tree, it actually felt like my face was like a bully was like shoving my face into the sand. And as that was going, you know, putting my hands into the sand and just fully dissolving. And so as I come out of this, the biggest impression left on me is I'm hitting my chest and I'm saying ape just over and over again. Like I'm just walking.
Like you're an ape or
ape. Yeah, like
okay.
I'm just nothing but like an ape. Like I just got reset. Like if a human had that factory reset thing you hit with the bobby pin, like that's what hit me. Like that's exactly what it was like.
Fuck. Sometimes it feels like that. And even that's why I find it interesting now, like after changing your approach to these things and actually going into it with respect and caution, and more importantly, in my opinion anyway, is to space out your trips, really integrate it. Because the tripping is like,
agreed.
What, 1% of the whole thing? It's nothing. Not to say it's nothing, but you know what I mean. It's all about the integration. It's 99% of it, it's integration. What are you going to do with that?
It's at least 50-50. Like it can't be less. It can't even be less. And it's probably...
Yeah, even now I think like that's like with people who teach about psychedelics, to me I would prefer to listen to the guy who's done one psychedelic trip, who's actually integrated a big portion of it, versus someone who's tripped 1,000 different times, every research chemical known to man, but their life is in shambles and their room's a mess. You know what I mean? Going back to Jordan Peterson.
Exactly. Their room is a mess. Like
if your room is a mess, don't trip on psychedelics.
Yes.
That's what I would say to my younger self.
It's so true for how we reverse the mistakes of the hippie era. Like if we have a bunch of psychonauts who truly believe in integrated responsibility and the safe use and responsible use and not regular use of these substances, like we might just have a chance at changing people's minds. Exactly. When they see that this guy does have a clean room and this guy is established in his family and he's not in shambles and he's not a guy talking to you about the gods beyond when he's, you know, bordering on joblessness.
Exactly.
We have a lot better chance of convincing people.
Exactly. And like eating Cheetos, never exercising, like you're like skinny / all fat.
It's like, hey, why are you such an asshole then? If you've talked to God so many times, why are you such an asshole?
Yeah.
Like.
And and I think a lot of people get detached from this reality and they see it all as an illusion. And like I said, even if that's the case from an absolute perspective, from a relative perspective, from a subjective experience, which is all we have really, it does matter. And how you treat your physical body is so important. Like I find having a healthy diet more important than having mystical knowledge, you know what I mean? Or having a good relationship with your family, or smart. Like if you're going to buy a coffee, give eye contact to the bartender, give a smile, spread that love, that compassion, or I don't know, be of use to the world. You know what I mean? Have a purpose, clean your room, shit like that. I know I'm like preaching now, but like I get really passionate about this stuff.
Yeah,
when people...
psychedelics bring us back to basics, and that's usually the most funny part. Like you expect to go talk to Vishnu and all the rest, and you end up just learning that you need to talk to your sister more, you know?
Exactly. Sometimes the human realm is more important. Again, like sometimes people look to, I don't know, like we contact like these mystical entities and we think of them as with infinite knowledge, when it's like, dude, give yourself credit. You're a human being living in this dense reality with so much suffering and hardship and challenges. Like the human being is so fucking powerful. It's unbelievable. Where these spirits are just floating around, like, you know, give yourself some credit, man.
I think that's where the motif of the voluntary acceptance of suffering comes in so powerfully for people who use a lot of psychedelics or could at least. And it's that, yes, you can see reality ultimately as some type of subjective illusion. But if you still decide to voluntarily act as if it matters and as if the stakes are real and suffering is real, and you're trying to alleviate it to the best of your ability, then, I mean, it's an ethos and it is a faith, but it's the best bet you probably have. It's my guess.
Exactly. Like what
my guess.
And it's not just about like what you believe, it's what works. What actually works? Does it have results? Does it help other people? Are you hurting other people from doing what you're doing? So it's just things like
you can
this.
astral project, but can you talk to your family?
Exactly. Fucking right. And sometimes that's the hardest thing. Like I look back on my own life, like a few years ago, gone really hard into this psychedelic journey, and I would face my own demons within myself and contact the psychedelic gods, but then I'm too afraid to like actually have a heart-to-heart conversation with my dad, or like that's like the really hard shit, you know, like reconciling those, I don't know, family karma or whatever you want to call it. Like that's the really hard shit, man, you know, because with psychedelics, for example,
or just when you have a trip.
Yeah, it's like it's hard as the experience can be, as challenging as it can be. Even if you're going to psychosis, you're getting attacked by demons, whatever you want to call it. The act from doing that was still just eating mushrooms. Like that act of putting mushrooms in your mouth, chewing it and swallowing, that doesn't take skill. Anyone can do that. What comes afterwards and how you handle it, that's a whole different story. But the very act of eating mushrooms is quite easy. Again, it's the everyday shit, the cleaning your room, not even cleaning your room, but being consistent with it every single fucking day. Like that can be really challenging. But that alone, that one advice has helped me more with my spiritual growth than most things that I've learned. So shout out to Jordan Peterson. I know there's a lot of controversy with people's opinions, but I think he's a very important figure that we needed to hear from at this stage, especially with this. Yeah. I know, kind of whatever you want to call it, beta masculinity kind of phase that we're in, but people who don't have that
sort
father figure.
The glorification of cowardice.
Yeah, exactly. And I like his perspective on psychedelics, and even Carl Jung, he knew this, man. He said, one of the quotes that I always say is, beware of unearned wisdom, right? And Carl Jung always had trepidation with psychedelics because he already had that experience. He went in as far as I remember, I think it was a 10 or 20 year psychosis he was in. That's where he got all his profound ideas of archetypes and the collective unconscious and all these things. He wrote it in the famous Red Book. And so he went through like a crazy psychosis and talking to archetypes and entities for a very, very long time without the use of psychedelics because he was already there. So then I think, based on his experience, he was always like, just beware of unearned wisdom, because sometimes getting a piece of knowledge can help you, but if you're in a certain stage of life, it can really fuck you up. It's like an example I like to use is, imagine telling a little girl, 5 years old, that, did you know that everyone that you know and love, especially you, is going to die one day? Like, imagine saying that to like a little girl.
And possibly painfully.
Yeah, and painfully, exactly. And even though that's the quote-unquote truth, yes, that's reality, that's what's going to happen, but Jesus Christ, man, she's a 5-year-old girl. Let her fucking... let her live life a little bit and, build the foundations of her mind before she gets to that knowledge. And I feel like in a lot of ways, the same with psychedelics or just spirituality in general. Sometimes you might get hit with something that's too overwhelming that you can't handle it. So then you have to spend a few months or even years. Like myself, I went through a crazy existential crisis just with that knowledge itself, that everyone's going to die. And I know that cognitively, but to experientially just feel it.
Yes.
It's
the recognition of time on a psychedelic trip. The words don't do it justice to understand the grim reality of the suffering of the direction we're going in time, and the way it affects everyone you love is something we can talk about endlessly and intellectualize, but until it's embodied, it means nothing.
No. And even then, like the fact that we're all connected, we like to say that all is one, but we really are all one. And sometimes when you connect with that truth, then you start to see everyone like, oh shit, I'm just living your life from a different point of time, different point of consciousness. And that can be really heavy, just knowing that how much horrific shit there is, like human trafficking, for example. And then you have to think like, fuck, am I living all these people's lives? Am I just going to go through this life again? I don't know. It's just really heavy knowing how horrific some experiences can be, and the fact that you are connected to it. It's terrifying. It
Or
can
even
be
worse, and have been erased by history. Like how much suffering in the void has been shouted out from a cave, 10,000 years ago.
Exactly. We're just getting spat
Like,
out through
this is
these
very
vagina
real.
portals with amnesia, and we just don't remember. And we're just remembering who we are.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
So-
pretty much.
So
Pretty
yeah,
much.
it goes back to like cognitively understanding something and really tapping into it experientially. It's something else,
That's
man.
the entire story of psychedelics, right? Like
Yeah.
like even me, thinking of whenever we do this retreat thing in the future, even thinking of it conceptually is one thing, but I'm very aware that once I'm sitting on a mat and you're about to ingest something, it's very, very different. Like,
Yeah, the fear never really goes away. I don't know. But at the same time, if you go into it with the respect, you clean your body before you go into it. And that's what I find, because some people have different opinions on the ayahuasca diet, for example. Do you really need to eat a certain way before ingesting this plant? And I feel like whether that's true or not, I think the very fact of you taking action and abstaining from certain things that you do on a daily basis, I think that can be very beneficial in and of itself before going into this ritual. It's like showing respect that I'm going out of my way to do this thing. I don't know, like eating healthy, for example, or staying away from porn, or
no, you're right, man. It's a ritual.
It's a ritual, exactly.
I think
and
we
we've
have a
lost
gap
that.
for ritual.
We've
Tom,
lost that.
for example, I don't seem to, out there in my thinking, and yet tell me why on a hike I just went on, I bottled creek water. Like, you know what I mean? There's just certain things about rituals that they fill a void. Like, I know there's no magic in the creek water, okay, but I still have it in a flask over there because I like to live in this this primitive context where the world still has a majesty to it and a magic. And so I hope that psychedelics can sort of take our increasingly nihilistic and secular world and sort of help us develop new personal mythologies and cultural mythologies and just fill that gap of spirituality and not just through using psychedelics, but through thinking about their insights. I hope they can do that.
You hit the nail on the head, man. Like you said, it's not just the psychedelic use, but thinking about their insights, like letting that knowledge marinate in your own life and seeing how you can apply that. And I love it that you bottled creek water. That's amazing. No, because we've lost that so much, man. Like, do you know how many people?
I don't care, man. People would say that's crazy. I love it. I touched an old tree too.
Oh, did you? That's sick.
Man. There's a gigantic, probably the progenitor of all these trees that were around. I went up to it, I touched my palm to it, and I gave it intention, because why not live in this ritualistic context? It's not hurting anybody. Don't become dogmatic and don't
why not
set rules. But I love this pagan appeal to the beauty of earth and the spirit within it.
And what happens if we're wrong and everything really does have a spirit? And then
exactly, they're gonna love me. The trees are gonna love me.
Because worst case scenario, it's like, let's say that you're wrong. You're not hurting anyone. It's not making your life any worse, so no biggie if you're wrong. But if the secular world is wrong, and
you're referring to Pascal's wager.
Like there really could be like maybe there is something to it, like giving ritual or intention to the nature around you. And we're all connected. We are nature. We even think of these trees as that's nature, and human beings where we must be separate from it. But
we are not.
But we are not at all.
What else I did, Tom?
What?
You know what else I did with that creek water?
Yeah, what did you do with that creek water?
I put it out under the moon last night.
Did you?
No reason. I don't know what happens when you put creek water into the moon, but I was deep in the forest, and I figured, that sounds kind of magical. Why not?
Hey man, you could be a pioneer in this area. Maybe there is a science to it.
So selling it for $19.99.
With only 5 payments of $5.99.
Yeah. It's for all Patreon supporters.
Yeah, exactly. But who knows, man? That maybe there is something to that. If there isn't, whatever. If you feel good from it, fuck it.
Yeah, man.
I've been allowing myself to be more, I guess, quote unquote hippie and more connected with nature. It just feels good. Even like in this quarantine, it's like might as well take advantage and meditate out in the sun. Let the elements hit your face and just really be present with it, versus just sitting inside all day. So, nature's powerful, man.
Totally, man.
But Yeah, man, I think that's a good way to end the chat. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. It's been really cool connecting with you, and especially before we go on our little Mexico venture, which for those listening at home, obviously with this whole, situation, it had to get postponed. So if all things go according to plan, it will be delayed until July. We'll keep you guys updated, but it's going to be a really cool way to connect in person, man, for sure.
Yeah, man. It's going to be really weird.
You're going to love it.
Can't wait.
And Mexico is a magical place, man.
Are you going to take me to the Matrix, Tom?
Of course.
Thanks, man.
I'll show you some things. I'll be like Morpheus, going through like all these simulated realities. I'm like, oh yes, and this is the Aztec pyramid where they sacrificed 1 million people. There's a head there. It's like, oh,
and this is the soul of your ancestors waiting in purgatory.
Yeah, Mexico is fucking something else, man. And it's actually going to be cool because if we're going in July, August is mushroom season. So we might be able to sneak a little mushroom ceremony.
Tom, I might even take some water in Mexico too. I might even take a little bit of Yucatan water. Do something to it. Who knows?
Who knows? Man? Yeah, man. Where can people follow you at home? Like for people listening.
People can follow me.
Yeah.
People can follow me on my YouTube channel, The Quentin Experiment, my Instagram by the same name. My Twitter is the Quentin EXP. And last but not least, join my Discord, a community of like 9,000 psychonauts just in there having great discussions. I'll see you guys in there.
Actually, I never plugged my Discord ever. So yeah, join my Discord too. Maybe we can merge.
Yeah, join Tom.
Yeah. We can unify our Discord.
I'd be in that.
That'd be cool, huh?
The community is stronger together.
Yeah. Actually, would you be keen, actually, for those listening at home, I reckon we should do like another Q&A maybe in the next few weeks or something. So if anyone has questions for Quentin or myself or both of us, comment below in this video, and then maybe we can do like a Q&A podcast special, because what else do we have to do in these times? Got to do something. Yeah.
We have nothing, Tom. We have nothing to do.
I just turned my computer off, start masturbating. I lied. All day, every day.
Oh, we know you're a fraud. You're a fat fraud. I can see it.
I'm a deceiver. Everything that I say are lies, apparently. Yeah, man.
That's funny.
Awesome talking to you, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, I hope that mic didn't sound too terrible.
No, it sounds. I think we're like a little bit delayed, but yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely delayed. That's why I kept accidentally interrupting you. Couldn't tell the pauses.
That's sweet as, man. Enjoy your. What are you, Quentin Quarantino?
Yeah, Quentin Quarantino, my friend.